Right, so I'm just on my own first page. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Sasha Maceira. Apologies for the difficulties here. And yes, I teach 120 and 220, just like Wendy said, and I was a WAC fellow at Hunter College 4 years ago in 2020. And I've just titled this, We Come Together, WAC Programs and College Composition. So first, I would say, in my experience, programs are meant to ensure that various disciplines work collectively in the construction of composition pedagogy, but without proper facilitation of collaborating across discipline lines, misconceptions arise as to what the true purpose of college composition is and how students may best be served. And I'm sorry, Julie, I'm on my second slide now. During my time as a WAC fellow at Hunter College in 2020, a suspicion I held was confirmed. In other disciplines, composition classes are sometimes seen as service courses where the teaching of mechanics is solely expected, and that the composition classroom is a place where linguistic monitoring and correcting should happen. However, nevertheless, my research has turned up some shared ideas, initiatives, and desired outcomes of college composition and the pursuit of good writing across disciplines. Going to my third slide now, it says the power of process. So process theory is a big part. Wendy mentioned that certainly in our composition classes. And I looked at this book by Dan Meltzer in which he did a study of observing 2,100 writing assignments across disciplines in 100 American post-secondary institutions. So Meltzer claims in his study that the WAC courses he observed asked students to write for real and hypothetical audiences beyond the instructor. These WAC courses stand out not just for their assignment of disciplinary genres rather than short answer exams, but also for their explicit placement of these genres within the social context of the discipline. They ask students to engage in extensive composing processes of drafting, peer response, tutoring response, and instructor response. These WAC courses stand out as an argument for the value of WAC programs and the transformative effects WAC initiatives like writing intensive courses and writing fellows programs have on college instructors and on the literary expectations placed on students. So process theory and the importance of teaching writing as a process, not just as a product, was prevalent across disciplines, basically. Another area found, and this was what I find to be most challenging in teaching writing, is argumentation, which is also seen across disciplines, according to Volkova and Bradford, whose article I read. There's selected a few quotes here. Writing argumentative essays is a genre that many students find challenging, and argument can be found in manifold and diverse academic genres, not only in argumentative essays. And this last quotation they sort of offer as a WAC-centered, I guess, classroom activity. Students can still benefit from some exposure to several argument patterns across disciplines. This would take the form of an engagement in interdisciplinarity in the classroom. This could be achieved through group work when exploring argument in the classroom by engaging in an awareness-raising activity, for example. In doing this, the students can relate to it through the lens of their own discipline and even work to compare and contrast the argument models presented. So also seeing how argumentation is something that is worked toward as a challenge in student writing across disciplines. And I would also say, at least from my own experience, a challenge to teach in composition. This is also another quotation I pulled from Volkova and Bradford, where it says, the academy is a place which is moving more and more to work across disciplines through cross-departmental and external collaboration. I think so. I certainly hope so. And some collaborative discussions of pedagogy that can happen across disciplines I've noted as discussion of assignments, activities, grades, standards, reviewing and or revising, use of rubrics if applicable, as well as others, of course. And while I see WAC-centered faculty development workshops as beneficial, these are conversations that can first happen within our departments and then branch out to conversations outside of our departments. Student success, faculty success, and success of the institution overall is our goal, of course. And I say, on starting within our departments, just because I don't know, and oh, Julie, I'm sorry, I haven't been updating you with my switching of slides. I'm now on my second to last. This is a conversation that is ongoing. I learned of it a couple weeks ago. A bit troubling, the precarious future of WAC at CUNY. and the decision to end WAC fellowships at the Graduate Center, which came from CUNY Central. So the reasoning behind it is unclear. I've reached out to some people who I thought might have some insight. The hope is that as the Graduate Center decides on alternatives to the program, WAC fellowships will be kept as at least one of the range of options. The belief is that WAC programs are meant to continue existing at the campuses, but how they will function without WAC fellows is a question that remains. So right now, the Graduate Center is saying that fifth-year students will receive the same monetary package as their WAC fellowship would offer, but they will be asked to either continue their GTF, which is a graduate teaching fellowship, which is generally in years 2 through 4, or arrange internships either within or outside of CUNY. WAC coordinators are working on putting together an internship program in order to continue the fellows program on campuses where it is supported. So this is troubling. My time as a WAC fellow in 2020, I found to be a great experience, particularly with the independent work that I did within the English department. But I really do think it was challenging, the collaborative process. I wish there was a little more collaboration between the disciplines, but I note that was difficult because it was 2020 and everything was on Zoom. That's about it. This is my works cited page, and thank you.
Great, thank you, Sasha. So our next presenter is from the economics department. Kenneth, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Ken McLaughlin in the economics department. And what I'm going to want to talk about is writing in the graduate program in economics. There basically isn't any writing in the undergraduate program. And I'm going to be talking about students writing their research. This is when they write research papers. This is not the research papers in 120. This is very technical writing. There are a couple things I want to point out. One is I do want to bring up what our biggest challenge is. And that's even though the writing is technical, the nature of the writing is technical, complicated problems that students are writing about their research, they can write it simply and clearly. The material is hard enough. So writing it simply and clearly is going to make it essentially readable. And that's what we really shoot for. Students don't want that. They want to appear smart. So they sit at their keyboard and they adopt a pretentious tone, an academic version of legalese or bureaucratese. And it doesn't work. And most of what we do, most of what I do in kind of developing good writing habits for these young researchers is trying to break those bad habits of pretentious writing. Okay, I should, let me explain a little bit about where writing enters the program in economics. It didn't enter at all in the graduate program, still doesn't in the undergraduate program, but teaching about writing wasn't part of the graduate economics program until 4 years ago. Courses could have term papers, but we didn't teach writing. And 4 years ago, we have a new course in research methods. And we decided that that research methods course ought to have a component about how to write research. That was 4 years ago. A year after, we developed a capstone course, an alternative to writing a thesis. And that course has a very heavy dose of writing. And once we kind of realized how it worked for that course, we said, let's transfer that over to the thesis writing. So now there are these 3 places in the program where students get taught writing, and 2 of them are the capstones, the research paper and or the thesis. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what we do in each course, and then a couple of things about kind of actual exercises. So we have a required course. Where this all started was a new required course called Data Analytics and Research Methods. Winter session. It all happens in 22 days. It is a big data coding course, absolutely the last place you would expect to find writing. And it is a place where we start teaching how to write clearly and simply, how to write an effective data section, a strong introduction to a research paper. The course doesn't have any exams. You know, the whole thing happens in approximately 3 weeks. It has very big, challenging data analysis estimation exercises, but those exercises have, we call them research notebooks. You could call them like a lab report. It is the first chance our students have to actually write about research. And they do it without me looking over their shoulder. I teach the course. The purpose is to just get them writing about their research, and I don't even look at them. Okay, it's just, I just look enough to make sure they are describing their research. We have plenty of other opportunities to get in and improve their writing. That course also has a project. They have to write, students write a 2-paragraph project proposal to get feedback on, and then a project paper. Okay, so as I said, a year after we developed that course, we rolled out this alternative way to get the degree called the Practicum in Empirical Economics. That's a 6-week course in the summer. Each student executes a large empirical project, again, kind of a big data thing, writes a research paper, and each student picks from basically 9 or 10 different topics. So in that course, everybody's doing their own research. There's no kind of common element for me to teach when we meet, except writing. So the course became entire, to the students, they're just spending all their time doing this research and they have to write it up. But for me, what I teach them is how to write. It's highly scaffolded from the first day. Continually, we're working on writing. So first day, there's a writing sample. 7 days later, a research proposal. Then every 4 or 5 days, a draft of some section of the research paper. So they're continually getting feedback, revising until 6 weeks later, they have a completed research paper. So the thesis research, once we figured out how it works for the people doing their research paper in the summer, the other group of people, basically the top half of our 25 or 30 graduates a year, we just transferred all the writing over to them. And now although each graduate student has their own thesis supervisor, there's one person who meets every 2 or 3 weeks with all the graduate students to talk about the common issues of working on thesis research, and most important, how to write a thesis. Okay, so those are the 3 courses. Students are continually getting feedback. On the thesis writers, it used to be that students would do all the research, and then a week or two before the deadline to graduate, they would think they could sit down and write a thesis. And then they find out they're graduating 3 months later or 6 months later. Now they're submitting sections again every 2 or 3 weeks. And at the end, they just have to package the revisions together. Okay, let me give you a couple of writing activities to give you a feel for what we do. One is in-sentence summary sentences. So every time I meet with the students writing the research paper in the summer or the thesis students, every time we meet, halfway through, we break for 5 minutes. And if the topic for the night is how to write a data section, each student, they have their own data. They have to write a 1-sentence summary of the data. Okay, I get up the next morning and I have like 20 of these sentences to give notes on, and they're all atrocious. Most of the students can't get it into 1 sentence. They write 2 or 3. And I give them suggestions on what could be better. And then we go back and forth on this. And by the time we're done, and the done part could be weeks later when I get another version of something. It's a polished sentence. It's beautiful, it sings, and it acts as an anchor to the section. So that 1 sentence that's a data summary becomes the anchor of the data section. And similarly, there's a empirical strategy section, and it will have 1 sentence. The introduction will have 1 sentence that basically describes the contribution of the research. So yeah, I even take time out in class to do that, and I think it's really effective. It's really effective for the students to see if it's an important sentence, you can work on it and make it really a good sentence. Another thing, the students get feedback all the time, right? On everything they're submitting, they're getting detailed notes. But we added a new thing. Jack, I think, is here. Jack Koenigsberg. Yes, Jack. With Jack's recommendation, he says, you know, that you're sending the students to the Writing Center for help, and it would be a lot more effective if you gave some direction. So now with every submission, in addition to the detailed notes, I write a few sentences that starts this week at the Writing Center, work with a tutor on, you know, these two issues. And I spell out the two issues. And the submission could have 4 or 5 serious problems that they could be working on. But I prioritize, take 1 or 2 of them, remembering myself that, look, next week they can work on these other things. But anyway, we think it works very well to go in there and say, the student can say, here's what my professor thinks I need to work on this week. And then the last one I'll mention is a sentence I use. Here, the advice I give to the student: you're going to sit down and you're going to work on a new section of your, let's say, thesis today. And the ordinary thing is you sit down and you start writing. Maybe you did some outlining before. I tell the students, or I recommend to the students, you ask this question. If you're writing the data section today, ask the question, what does the reader need to know about the data to understand the results? So the whole reason for the paper is the results. Everything else in the paper is serving the purpose of the reader being able to understand the results. So ask that question and then answer it. And maybe it's, here are the 4 or 5 or 6 things that the reader needs to know about the data. Write those down, figure out what order they ought to go, and then you write it. Rather than while you're writing, you're continually figuring out, oh, should I put this in or should I not put this in? Framing it with this question tells you that the should or should not, does it belong or not belong, is all in the service of the reader understanding the results. So anyway, I encourage the students to do that. And I think if I can I do one more point? Maybe some of my other ideas I can bring up in discussion, but one of the habits we kind of struggle with, I mean, the pretentious writing style that I discussed, it's a habit that's difficult to break. You just can't tell the student that, look, you're writing in passive voice all the time and various other problems. Okay, you can tell them, but it takes a lot of work for them to recognize it themselves and do something about it. But one thing that really surprised me, I didn't anticipate this, is that students are very good at writing as if they're reporting what they did on their summer vacation. Oh, I went to this website and I got these data and I downloaded these data. And then I brought these data into Stata and I reorganized the data and I created this variable, and no one freaking cares. That's not what goes in a research paper in the description of the data, because, as I say to the students, it's not about you. Your role as a writer in a research paper is the narrator. You are the narrator in the story of the evidence. So take yourself out of the story. Okay, when you're writing the data section, the data is the subject. Your sentences should have as subjects the data, the coding of the data, the properties of the data. It's not you. So this is one of the struggles because it is just much more natural. It's much easier to say, here's what I did. Okay, so those are some of the things we're dealing with in economics graduate writing and how we're going about it. And I'll leave it at that.
Great, thank you, Kenneth. So we'll move on to our final presenter is Barbara from was it Barbara? Yeah, Barbara from the Dolciani Center of Mathematics. So I'll turn it over to her.
Hi, as Wendy said, I'm Barbara Barone. I'm going to be speaking to you in a little bit different way. I teach 2 courses in the math department for prospective elementary school teachers. And I tend to get them pretty much as freshmen. So the writing that we do in that course, or those courses, is very different than what we would do in most courses. We use it as a tool to try to get the students to get their ideas across to various constituents. So one has to realize that this is a course that teaches why we do the certain things in math as opposed to how we do it. So what we're trying to get the students to do is to do a lot more communicating, whether it be orally or in written ways, so that they can get their ideas across. So students are asked to do this in a variety of ways. There are response papers that they're supposed to do. There are projects with various skills needed. So what I'm going to do is give you a short list, very short, of the skills that show, or of the projects that show the different skills that students need to practice. So they are doing daily prompts with responses and with journal entries. They're explaining in short paragraphs every day how they would explain the concepts to students, all right? They're justifying math procedures, and then they're doing several projects, one of which is to read articles on several classroom activities, choose one, summarize the activity, and then make the case for why they chose that one and why the others should not be chosen. We have them reviewing children's books to give synopsis of the book, tell where the math is, and how they could use the math in their classroom. We also have them write letters to parents, prospective parents in their classroom, explaining why they're using some children's literature to teach math and how they can follow up with the ideas at home. We have them also writing letters to, quote, assistant principals, having read certain number of activities or books for their particular subject and justifying why that book should be the one that's chosen. We have them rewriting some biographies so that 4th or 5th graders could understand the reason that they're picking these particular people, like minorities or women in mathematics. And then at the end of the semester, we have them doing a course reflection where they talk about whether they understood the underlying concepts in the course and justifying and giving reasons for where they can show that they have learned the content. Some of the struggles that I see with this is that a lot of the students don't write very well. They also don't understand the concept of proofing, all right? Since they're teaching, or they're going to be teaching, this is really critical. We also have an issue with plagiarism, all right? And what I would say is that most of our students spend most of the time summarizing the content and not giving their opinions. So we try to work on that a little bit. The assignments vary from reading articles to making decisions about using the content. I'm having trouble speaking today, sorry. And also, one of the things that students also have trouble with is how many pages? That's the question I get all the time. How many pages do you want this to be? I don't care how many pages it is. I mean, what I want you to do is to get your ideas across. And if you can get it across in 1 page, fine. If you need 5 pages, whatever you need. But they're so conditioned to what they were doing in high school that, it's got to be that rote way of doing things. So those are some brief ideas of what we've been doing in this course. And if there are any questions, we can take them as we go along.
Excellent. Thank you, Barbara.